Hello there, my name is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as LevDev, and as you can notice by the little setup here, I decided to customize the background a little bit to help make this a lot more accommodating for spoiler season for the Guilds of Ravnica set. This is day 2, and there is actually some pretty peculiar powerful cards that we've seen so far. Like, this set is looking like it's going to be pretty cool. Now, first we're going to start out with some foreign language spoilers. What I'm going to do is, I think just for fun, I'm going to read the title of it, but just so that I don't try to read all this, because my pronunciation, as you've seen from the previous videos, is not the best, I'll just pretty much explain what the card does in my native language of English. So, let's just get started with Spion Susurrante, 1 in a black. It's a vampire that's a 1/3, and it says that whenever you Serviere for the first time in your turn, or any turn, the creature will deal 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. Overall, this is just a decent limited card. I think if you are very defensive with either a Dimir control deck, or maybe even like a black Gagari control deck that has some Serviere splash into it, this is just a fine limited creature. It's defensive, it helps you block against early game creatures. Anytime you Serviere, you pretty much do a poke and gain some life. So honestly, it's mostly just purposes in limited for defense. In standard, I would say it's not bad, but it really depends on if Serviere tempo deck is a thing. It's tempting to actually put this like maybe in a black-white life gain deck if you do have some significantly powerful Serviere cards, and just do it like with a Johnny's Pridemate and such with the minimal life gain and such, or the other cards that are in the meta from Core 19 and such that do benefit from life gain. That's a thought, but I do think just piloting that deck and brewing that deck all itself will be kind of tricky. It'll be a fun brewing challenge, but I do think you're going totally a wrong way around to just doing some easier life gain spells that are in the meta. Still, it's an interesting card. Definitely will see limited play. Constructed, we'll wait and see. Next is Segrete del Mausoleo, which I think stands for Secret of the Mausoleum. 1 in the black, instant spell, Overgrowth. Search for a card in your library that's a black card that's mana cost is equal to or less than the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Reveal it and put it into your hand. Wow. This is pretty good in the right decks. I mean, it's definitely going to be one of those decks where it's definitely the Gagari Fiend, like you have to have creatures in your graveyard to use as a resource for the Overgrowth mechanic. But even with that semi-clause of how to get it, this has been a while since we got actually a really, really good tutor in Magic like this, like a 2-cost tutor. Like, we're usually used to our tutors costing, like, 4 mana, or, like, even, like, maybe you tutor with a creature and you have to beat a specific condition and such. Like, we never seen 2-cost tutors in a while. And the fact that we got this one, sure, it's restricted to black cards, but I think it's purposeful because, let's be frank, if you're going into this whole Overgrowth mechanics shtick, you're probably going to focus on reanimator style strategies or focus on milling strategies for black, and black has a lot of options, like the Necromancer one that essentially is the 1-drop in the Core 19 that nils the free cards when it enters and dies and such. So black has a lot of ways to put cards in your graveyard. I don't think this is a card you want to put in, say, an absent deck per se, and then be like mid-range and be like, oh, maybe I can use this as a 2 or 2-cost creature and such. I think that's kind of pointless. Will this see play in Commander? Most likely. I mean, the Gagari style decks do focus a lot on the graveyard shenanigans, and this could just tutor out some pretty high drops in the late game. And if you need a really powerful low drop in the early game, it probably will do its function as well. Overall, really good card in this set. I think this is one to keep an eye out for Commander, and maybe decent and limited if you get the right Gagari sub-strategy or even mill strategy. Standard, I'll wait and see. The power level is definitely there, but it needs to be in a deck that can spend the 2 mana on instant speed to tutor something late game, or even like mid-range or such, like middle of the game and such. Next is Tella de Vil Notturno. I think it's how it's a fairy that's 1 in the blue, 1/2, flying, and has the ability that whenever it attacks and deals combat damage to a player, Servier 1. Overall, we never a while back, like when I was doing the Pat Spoiler blog, and they were talking about the Narcomoeba reprint. I think it's pretty much the Dredge energy one, where it's the blue 1/1 flyer that whenever it's put into a graveyard from the library, it gets onto the battlefield. Narcomoeba, that's the name. And how I said there is a potential, at least in the comments, I think, that there's a potential of a tempo flying favorable wind style deck. This card is kind of going to be a good component if that deck is ever going to be a thing. Also, the blue mythic that we've seen, such as the Dream Eater and such, I think this is actually a potential archetype to test out. I don't know if it's going to be either monocolored or maybe even guilds colors or such, or maybe even a tricolored deck, but I think this deck, after seeing this, has some legs in standard. Now, in limited, fine card. It is a card that is a 1/2 flyer. Yeah, once your opponents do get flyers, this can easily be chump block and such. But I do think just getting this out on turn 2 and just taking advantage of the Servier triggers is just enough for if you can get this at least once or twice and such. And it will provide its function perfectly. Plus, if we have any ways to buff the creature and such with either auras or such, which I don't know if that's the case. We haven't seen the whole set to see if auras are a thing or such. But overall, it's a fine creature. The Servier trigger is really nice. And I do think in a favorable wins deck in Constructed and Standard, it might actually see some legs thanks to this card. Last in the foreign language spoilers, it's... And this one's going to be a hard one, so forgive me. Piogigia di Nozioni? I think it's how you pronounce that. 1 Endermere, 1 blue and a black, common, it's sorcery, and it does something really cool. Servier 2, then draw 2 cards, deal 2 damage to yourself. This, in Demir for Popper and such, is kind of a very tempting Read the Bones. I mean, I think this is better than Read the Bones? In some instances, I think the answer is potentially yes, because I think it's one of those cards that is potentially very beneficial if you are playing, say, a Graveyard Shenanigans in Demir and such. Now, most of the popular Graveyard Pauper decks are in Golgari and such, but if Demir really wants to try their hand on the Reanimator shtick, I think this is the card that's going to help them out a little bit. I don't think there's enough pieces in there to make it a viable deck archetype, but I do think the power of this card in Pauper is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, it's not, like, amazing compared to, like, the Flash Servier 1 we got yesterday, but it's not a bad card. I can see some people just budget playing this in a Pauper deck just to toy with it. Overall, fine card. Will you play this in Limited? Most likely you will, especially if you're playing Sealed. It's just a standard Sealed card, or even sometimes in Draft, just, oh hey, I need to restock my hand of tools to help win the game. Here you go. You can filter out, make sure it's not lands and such, and just get your bombs or get your late game stuff, so... Overall, that's its main purpose, or even, maybe you're feeding stuff into the graveyard for, say, an overgrowth trigger, or something like that. Overall, really fine card. I think this is one of, not the best commons that's been revealed yet, but it's a really good common. I'm curious to see if this sees some fringe Pauper play. Anyway. Oh, whoops, sorry about that. We're going back to the left. Oh, there we go. Next up is a 4-mana 2/3. Now we're going back to cards I can read without sounding funny with the pronunciation. In theory. A Beast Whisperer. 2 and 2 green for 2 free Elf Druid. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Wait, this is a card? Okay, some people who are new to Magic might just look at this card and just think, is this card really that good? I mean, you're paying 4 mana for a 2 free. Isn't that like too much? No, guys. Guys, you gotta look at this ability. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Also, it's an elf. This is a card that for modern elves, they might actually consider toying with this card. I mean, seriously. The factor that most elf decks, mostly their main purpose is to try to cast as many elves as possible. And they were looking for a 4-drop to toy with that's can help them restock their hand. This is kind of a perfect 4-drop for that deck. I mean, you're going to be casting a bunch of elf spells with just ways to ramp up and such, and you can draw cards, which helps you draw more elves, which then you can cast more elves to ramp more mana. It's just a really good card for Constructed. For its limited, yeah, it's a fine card. If you're primary in green, and you are in theory a creature-oriented deck, which 75 to maybe 80% of the time you probably should be, unless if an Izzet spell deck is a thing, or a spell-oriented deck can be a thing in the limited meta. But overall, you're going to be playing a majority of creatures, and just having this out as a 2-free that pretty much next time you cast a creature next turn, you draw a card to help you dig into your deck more, it's relatively a good card. It's going to be great in limited. It's going to probably see some constructed play toyed with in elves and modern, and it'll probably even see some standard play just because it's a good way to restock. I mean, yeah, in standard, it's probably going to be prone to a lot of removal, like Lightning Strike, etc., etc., etc. But I do think people need to at least toy with this card, because I think it has potential to be very powerful. Next up is the No-Hide Ferrats. 2 and 2 green, so another 4-cost creature. That's a 6/6 with Hexproof. That's a mythic. So, okay, what's the catch? You can't cast non-creature spells. Wait, what? Oh, and it has a 2-mana ability that No-Hide Ferrats loses all abilities until end of turn, and a player may activate this ability, including your opponent. If a spell or an ability an opponent controls causes you to discard No-Hide Ferrats, put it into your battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. Overall, I think this card is really, 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 really good. Wait. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought I saw someone, like, being eaten inside that art or such. I think that's just his teeth. Mistaken there. But anyway, this card, though, is ridiculously, absurdly good. I think people first looked at this card and they just look at the factor that he can't cost non-creature spells. Let's be frank, a majority of people who play this card are going to probably play it in creature-specific oriented decks, like Mono Green Stompy, etc., etc. And this helps with Galta triggers, and yeah, you can't cast non-creature spells, but let's be frank. The factor that ability, so the opponent will probably want to remove this, because it sits its hexproof, it's going to swing in, it's going to deal damage, so they're probably going to try to -2 it to target it with a removal spell. So then, once they do that, as long as you hold up some mana, you can protect it and such, since now you can cast spells, since it lost all of its abilities until in a turn. Yeah, this card is just really, really, really decent card. I think this will see constructed play in Mono Green Stompy. The only con to this card that it is prone to sacrifice removal, since it's not being targeted and such, which a majority of hexproof creatures in general have that clause. Still, the fact that I do like this card in design to some extent, because it is one of those where it's kind of a weird interaction card, because it's kind of a tempo card. Unless you're a very heavy creature-oriented deck, then let's say you have like a 4-cost removal spell, having to spend 6 mana essentially to cast that removal spell could be a significant tempo loss, but on the other side of the coin, it's a 4-mana sit-sits, which could help you if you're playing a creature-oriented deck get out Galta really, really early. Yeah, I think this card will see play. No doubt about that. And in Limited, it's an absolute bomb. It's going to be hard for people to remove this. You're probably going to get in some good damage before it dies, which it probably will die, so don't get into best case mentality with that. It's a good card. Don't underestimate this card. This card is absurd. Next is actually a returning theme, which we already known that this was going to be a theme, is gates are coming back. We saw already the Gagari Gate, but now we kind of are seeing this kind of a homage to Trans Guild Promenade, I think it's the name of the card, which is the Gateway Plaza. It's a gate. It enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you pay 1 mana, and you add 1 mana of any color. Overall, great for limited. It is one of those that if you're playing a multicolored deck, which Guilds of Ravnica has been trying to encourage with all the gold cards we're seeing and all the other cards, this is just a decent card. Yeah, you are going to have a tempo loss, like if you play this on turn 2 and you can't play a 1-drop with 2 mana because you have to spend the 1 mana to make sure it doesn't sacrifice. Don't get me wrong, that is a cost. But overall, it's just a fine limited card if you are playing any multicolors, especially if you're going into free colors. This is just good as a 1-of or 2-of. I would say 1-of in limited, but who knows? We have to really see this meta played out before we can make that conjecture. But overall, just a fine card. In standard, I don't know if a gate deck is going to be a thing. Gates, I'll kind of like the cons of like how some they're the tap dual color lands that we have seen in the kind of like in the Core 19 set and such that Into the Battlefield tapped as well. The con of those cards is you are going to have a significant tempo loss when you play tapped lands. There's just no denying that. You're going to lose a significant amount of tempo. So unless you have a deck that wants to really take advantage of gates, which, unless we get like another Mazes In style card, which I don't think we're even going to get from the set, I don't think it's a thing you should be doing in Constructed. I think as a 1 or a 2-of in some specific dual color decks, it's fine. But there are way better options. I mean, Shocklands, enough said. So, overall, it'll be interesting to see if this sees Constructed play, but it's a limited card that will help you filter out your lands. So, filter your color. No sweat about it. You'll probably play this in limited. Next is the Artful Takedown. 2 blue and a black. Instant spell. Common. Sheesh, it seems like Dimir is getting all the really good to decent common spells. Choose one or both. Tap target creature, and target creature gets -2, -4 until end of turn. I mean, this is not the best Dimir common we've seen, but it's still a really, really decent one. I mean, it's definitely going to see its play unlimited. No denying that. I mean, it's a combat trick. Yeah, the problem is it is a very predictable combat trick, which I think that's a con with most of the Dimir cards. For being very secretive, if you have the mana untapped, people might presume that this card is going to be a thing they have to deal with. But still, even then, you don't have to use it for the -2, -4. You could just use it in general just to tap a creature down, which is relatively just fine. And also getting -2, -4 can help you with, say, a trade. Or maybe you can even trade and then tap a creature down so you can go in for damage on your next turn if you did this during the opponent's combat step and such. Those are very tempting. I don't know if it will see Pauper play, but it will at least be tried. I think it will at least be very much tried. In Standard, I don't know. I'm going to wait. There's a lot more better combat tricks that we've seen in the meta that are a lot better than Artful Takedowns, so yeah. So, it's going to be an absolute bomb in Limited. This is a great Limited common to pull if you're in Dimir. It's a good combat trick. You're going to be grateful when you have it. Okay, so that's what happened. Okay. We just... Technical difficulties, y'all. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see here. Next up is actually a very interesting and actually really good card to go back into Standard with. Gimmer's Insight. Free and a blue instant. Draw 2 cards with Jumpstart. And as we mentioned before, Jumpstart, long story short, you can cast this card in your graveyard as long as you discard a card from your hand and still pay the mana cost. So, but you do have to exile the spell, so, from the graveyard. So, overall, this is just a fine replacement for this type of card. Like most control decks, like the most popular control card that's a draw engine that people like to play in their decks at the current moment as this video is recording is Glimmer of Genius, which is scry 2, draw 2 cards, instant. This is just a decent replacement for that. I mean, there are people who play Holographic Illuminations, which is a common version of that. I think this will just be a decent replacement for that, because overall, this spell helps you draw 4 cards with 1 card, in theory. I mean, yeah, you do have to discard a card, but let's be frank, if you're playing late game, you're probably just going to discard a land or something. So discarding a land to draw 2 cards and such is not bad. So it's definitely going to probably see constructed play in standard and control decks. I would be surprised if it doesn't. And in limited, yeah, you don't mind if you're playing a dirtily deck. You don't mind having at least one or maybe even two of these in a deck. I would say one is fine in limited. It's a good card. It is one that I think it's one of the really better Jumpstart cards, and if we get more better Jumpstart cards, who knows? Maybe Jumpstart is a deck can be a theme in Constructed. I don't think so quite yet. Am I still going to try to Jink Brew it and see what happens? Of course. Next card we're going up to is the Guild Summit. So this is going to be one that relies on gates. It's 2 and a blue, enchantment. When Guild Summit enters the battlefield, you may tap any number of untapped gates you control. Draw a card for each gate tapped this way. Okay. Whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. In Limited, this is going to be a weird card. I think you're going to have access to a lot of gates, because I do think that is going to be one of the things like they do with the core set, like core set 2019. Chances are you are going to get a gate in your packs. Like, I think you have a chance of either going to be a basic land or a gate. I don't know if it's going to be gate and basic land or such. I haven't actually seen the details on such, but I think it's either a chance of a basic or a gate. So there are going to be a lot of gates being passed around. And if you're in a multicolored deck, or even a free color deck, that do rely on gates, this might not be a bad draw engine. I mean, I don't think people will take advantage of much of the first clause, except they're playing, like, constructed formats like Commander and such, because I would be surprised if people want to play this on turn 3 if they're going to have any mana they want to tap to essentially tap this and cast this. Because, let's be frank, when you tap those, you kind of lose your mana, so wouldn't you rather use that mana to cast a creature spell than a slow enchantment that doesn't really do anything? Yeah, you draw cards, don't get me wrong, and I think if he enters the battlefield and if you draw one card from just tapping one gate and still have like 2 mana up, it's fine. But honestly, I think most people are looking at the clause because of the second part of that card, which is whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. We've been trying to find an excuse to make kind of like a landscape, like Scapeshift type of deck where feeding lands into the graveyard and then either getting them back through Scapeshift or through cards that we have in the meta to bring land cards from the graveyard to the battlefield, like, oh, I don't know, Crucible of Worlds. This might actually be a fun gimmick deck to try out. I don't know if it's going to be a constructive competitive card, per se, but it is a card that is tempting to think about. It's a fun card to probably play in Commander. It's probably, we'll see some fringe play in Limited if you have the proper gates. Note to self, I don't think you play this if you have like 1 or 2 gates in your Limited deck. Just word to the wise on that one. Overall though, it's a very fascinating design card. I'll say that right off the bat. Next, another card that interacts with Gate, the District Guide, 2 and a green, creature, Elf Scout. It's a common 2/2, which is when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card or a gate card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Honestly, this card is just fine and limited. It's kind of one of those, it's a 23rd to either maybe even a highly sought after card if you do need the color fixing from the gates or from the lands you pull from it. Spending free mana for a 2/2 is a little weird, but if you're just spending 2 mana for a 2/2 and 1 green to essentially just tutor for a basic land, it's actually really good. And if you have any way to bounce this and such and just get multiple lands from it to put in your hand, that actually is pretty good. I think mostly it's going to see its play in Commander, though, because it is kind of... Are there better options in Commander? Yes, but I do think if you have any realm of messing with the gates in your deck in Commander, which there are decks that do mess with gates, like Maze's End decks, as I mentioned before, which makes Guild Summit also good for those type of decks. District Guide is also good for those decks as well, because then they could tutor out a gate to help hopefully win with the Maze's End condition instead of Dragon Maze or Maze's End condition, victory condition. Which, for those who don't know, it's a card, it's a gate that essentially amounts to that if you control all gates from all guilds, such as Izzet, Golgari, all the guilds, you win the game automatically once you tap it and do something. I can't remember the full text of it, but essentially it's an alternate win condition card. And there are some commander decks that I know that do try this alternate win condition shenanigans, and they are probably going to like this card as a tech card. It's fine. You'll see play in limited, most likely, but most likely it's also going to just see play in commander. Next is the Goblin Cradle Maker. First of all, that art is gorgeous. 1 in a red, Goblin Warrior 2/2, and it has an activated ability 1 mana. Sacrifice Goblin Crater Maker, and you choose one of this. It either deals 2 damage to a target creature, or, and this is the one that makes people very excited, destroy target colorless non-land permanent. She wizards is trying to hate out Tron. Okay, yeah, the obvious thing that people looked at this card, it's like, oh hey, I finally have a cheap way to take out Karn, or take out, say, Ugin, or take out pretty much any colorless permanent that's a pain, like even a really annoying artifact and such. And that is true, but I do think this card has a lot more potential than people are giving it credit for. I think it's definitely going to be a tech card for Tron, don't get me wrong. It's a really good tech card. But it's also just good because it's just a bear. I think people need to realize that in Limited, this is just, if you're in these colors, it's a decent bear that has an interesting activated ability that can be used as a combat trick. Like, let's say you don't attack with this and you attack with something, and if it deals 2 damage, then it will be lethal to one of the opponent's creatures. Oh, hey, sacrifice your Goblin Cradle Maker, deal 2 damage, boo. Oh, and it invades your graveyard shenanigans if you have graveyard shenanigans. Yeah, this is an all-around just a good uncommon. It'll probably see play in Constructed. It will probably see play in Limited. Don't underestimate this card. This card is really good. Plus, also, it's just great to see... I just noticed a little cat in there. Oh my gosh, this art is gorgeous. And yeah, it is great to finally have a way for red decks to actually deal with Tron that's not Blood Moon. Anyway. Next up is the Deafening Clarion. 1 in Boros colors, red and white, sorcery speed. Choose one or both. Deafening Clarion deals 3 damage to each creature, okay, I'm just going to say just or, well, you know what I'm saying. Or creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. Yeah, this is a card to not sneeze at. This card is really... Whew, it's really good. It's one of those, it's a Sweltering Suns type of effect, which, if you're playing any mid-range deck in Boros, if that's a possibility, or even like a mid-range Naya deck with big creatures and such, just having this board wipe to take out like small creatures that will block your way and such, that's good in itself. And even if you have to use it as a board wipe to, if you're in circumstances where the opponent is at a major advantage compared to you, that's just fine. I mean, board wipes are never nothing to sneeze at, and the factor that it has the ability to also give your creatures lifelink, so like I said before, if you're playing a mid-range to even like a heavy creature-oriented deck where your creatures are late-game creatures that have like big butts and such, or big toughness and power, yeah, giving them lifelink to help you get the Temple Swing that if you attack in and gain life and such is nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, I think this card is great and limited. It's going to be great in the right deck. Keep that in mind, in the right deck. You probably want to put this in a deck where you have late game creatures. I don't think you want to put this in the Boros deck where you have a bunch of little creatures, unless you're triggering to make them bigger using Minter and such, which is a possibility, so keep that in mind. But overall, yeah, this card will see play in Limited. This card will probably see play in Constructed. I would be surprised if it does not see play in Constructed. It's just a really, 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 really good card. Next up, as another really, really good guild card, Ionize. 1 in Izzet, blue and a red. Counter target spell. Ionize deals 2 damage to target spell's controller. Honestly, it's just a counter spell that it's a cancel that allows you to deal 2 damage to an opponent. If we get more spells like this, it could actually make the possibility of counterburn be a thing, which I think there's some players who like that archetype and love the factor that this archetype might be a thing again. So, I think this is a no-brainer that we'll see play in Constructed. Limited, if you're in the right colors, if you're in Izzet colors, it's not bad, especially in sealed. You want to be careful when playing cancels like in draft though, because sometimes cancels in draft are a lot less effective than they are in sealed, so keep that in mind, even with the burn damage opportunity aspect of it. So, overall, good card. Also, keep in mind we have stuff like Goblin Spell, pretty much the ways to reduce the spell's mana cost, so yeah, just a thought for Izzet spell decks, just saying. Next is a really, really weird card, but actually pretty cool. It's the Runaway Steamkin. 1 in a red, creature, elemental. It's a 1-1. Okay, so spending 2 mana for a 1-1. What's the deal? Well, the deal is whenever you cast a red spell, if Runaway Steamkin has fewer than 3 1-1 counters on it, put a 1-1 counter on Runaway Steamkin. Okay, so it can go up to, say, a 4-4. Oh, and also, if you remove free 1-1 counters from Runaway Steamkin, add free red mana. This card is going to be a very, very powerful card in Limited. I think people are underestimating this card for Limited. I mean, to put my... It's actually funny that they put the Blade Disruptor right next to this, because that actually proves my point a little bit. This card is secretly a card you want for, say, any decks that are Mentor-centric style decks. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong, it's Izzet art, so they want you to put this in a spell-centric deck, which, yeah, you can do that, and if you have a lot of red spells, you can do this and then just ramp for more red mana and such, but I think people need to remember, it's free +1/+1 counters. Mentor gives you +1/+1 counters. So there are other ways to give this creature +1/+1 counters rather than casting red spells. So I think this is actually both a really great Izzet spell card in Limited, but it's also a decently good Boros card for, like, Mentor. Yeah, the creature has to attack in, which could be problematic, don't get me wrong. But let's say, for example, oh, I don't know, let's say there's 2 counters already on this. There's a creature that someone's defending because it has a really beneficial stat. You attack in with Blade Disruptor, Runaway Steamkin. Blade Disruptor gives the Mentor trigger on this, and then they try to block it to kill the Steamkin, and then you're like, oh, in response, I'm going to remove free 1-1 counters, get free red mana, and then, say, cast a instant spell that deals damage to a creature and such. Now, the problem is we don't really have any good instant burn spells, but we do have, like, instant, at least in Limited, that we've seen right off the bat. But you kind of see what I'm getting at here? This card is, I think, potentially really powerful with both spells, but also both Mentor-like effects. Will it see playing Constructed? I don't know. There's a lot... The Constructed meta at the moment is very removal-centric, and this card pretty much bites the dust on a lot of removal that's currently in Standard. So, unless you're playing this like on turn 4 or turn 5, which then kind of beats the point, I would be surprised if this sees constructed. Though it is tempting to see if you could play this in, like, say, a kind of like Stormy style deck, if that's a thing. If we get enough cards to make it Storm style deck, it's interesting thought at the very least. But I think this is also just a decent card in general, just for Mentor style decks if they ever a thing and such, because just being able to get free red mana to help ramp up is nothing to sneeze at. Overall, great for Limited, as long as you put it in the right deck, and also I think it's a potentially sleeper constructed card. I mean, I'm not going to bet the farm on it. There's also just potential that this card will just steam out, but it's at least a really fun designed card. I mean, the fact that I'm talking about it for about 5 minutes should indicate how interesting the design is. Now, we're going to skip this card because I already talked about it during my first, I think it was either day 1 or the Pat's blog spoiler or such, so we don't know this card exists. It's a 2-1 common, 3-1 Mentor. It's pretty self-explanatory. Are you playing aggro style decks, or are you playing a deck that benefits a lot from Mentor? You're going to play this card in Limited, and maybe in Constructed if the archetype exists. But the problem is the toughness does make it prone to a lot of constructed removal, so keep that in mind. Next up is, we're actually going to go through these real quick because, as we mentioned before, gates are going to be a thing. And like we said, there are 5 guilds in the Guilds of Ravnica expansion, and each of them are actually having a cool thing where they're getting gates, but they're getting double gates. Like, each of them have a different art. They're still the same card in general. Like they enter the battlefield tap, and you still tap for either the color of the pairs of the guilds, but we're getting pretty much different art for some of these cards, and just seeing them go with that little dynamic to make it the draft experience or even just deck construction a lot more dynamic, it's kind of fun. Plus, the art on these gates are actually pretty cool. So yeah, there's Boros, Demir, Selesnya, Izzet, and of course, the Gagari. So, that's all the cards that got been revealed today, but we're not done. Like I said before, there's actually some cards I missed from the previous day right when I uploaded the video, and I'll probably miss like one or two once I uploaded this video, so yeah. But still, I do want to talk about these cards. One is Izone, a Thousand Eye, 2 black black green green for a legendary creature Elf Shaman. It's a 2/3 undergrowth. When this creature enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black and green instant creature token for each creature card in your graveyard. Green and a black, sacrificing that creature. You gain 1 life and draw a card. Honestly, just a good card. I think this is a card that you will probably want to play in Limited if you're specifically Gagari and you do have the graveyard shenanigans. Just the tokens you generate, and the factor that you can use that to sacrifice to gain life and draw cards. Depending on how the removal is in this meta for Limited at the very least, this card might have ability to stick, and even if it doesn't stick, you still have the tokens that it generates from the Into the Battlefield effect, so you can use that for a variety of synergies, such as Convoke, which we're going to get to that pretty shortly. But also, this just can benefit if you have other spells that synergize with either sacking tokens, or maybe even buffing tokens and such, so as long as a Gagari Graveyard deck is a thing and limited, it will see play. Constructed, definitely it's going to be toyed with in Gagari Commander decks. I would be surprised if it has not, because that token generation and the fact that you draw cards in itself is really good. I would be surprised if this is a Commander, but I would see this see play in the Gagari style, Reanimator style decks just as a tech card. In Constructed, in Standard at the very least, it really depends on if Absent or even a Gagari token deck can exist. If it can, yeah, it's a decent tech card, but it is a legendary, so be cautious about that. Overall, though, it's a fine card. I think it will see most of its play in Commander and Brawl and such, and probably just its fringe play in Limited. Last card of the day is the March of the Multitudes, which is Etz green and a white for an instant spell with Convoke, which means you can tap your creatures to cast a spell and such. And it's create Etz, which is whatever Etz you put in on the top. 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink. Oh, did I mention it's an instant? Yeah, this card is pretty good. I mean, it's absurd. I'll put it like this. There was a card, say, in Night. A family member. Anyway, what was I at? Oh, yeah. There was a card in, I think it was either in Fates Reforged, or I don't think it was in the original cons, I could be wrong, but it could just been either in Fates Reforged or Dragons of Tarkir, called Secure the Waste, which was an Etz white or something along that created Etz warrior creature tokens and instant speed as well. And that card seen a lot of play, especially in aristocratic style decks that were in the meta at that time. This card, don't get me wrong, Chain Whirler is in the meta, and that does make this card hard to play in Standard a little bit. But if Absent tokens needed a tool to be a thing, oh dear, this is a really good tool for that deck. And the thing is, people are saying Chain Whirler, but here's the thing, it's instant speed. You don't have to cast this spell on the opponent's turn. You can cast, or not, actually, you want to cast this at the end of the opponent's turn. That was a brain fart. You want to cast this at the end of the opponent's turn. You don't have to cast this on your turn. And if you do, then hey, those tokens will technically have haste, and you have any way to, say, give either a Anthem-like effect and such. That could be in some instances just a finisher by itself, or maybe even an aristocratic deck that might actually benefit by sacrificing the tokens, if that's a possibility in this meta and such. I mean, this card is nothing to sneeze at in Standard. I think you're going to... I think if a token deck or even just a mid-range creature deck is a thing, boy, are they going to love this card a lot. Now, in Limited, yes, you play this card. If you're playing a token-centric style deck like Selesnya is pretty much encouraging, you want to play this card, you want to go wide, you're probably going to play the Anthem of Like effect that they are probably going to have in this set, and you're probably going to go in for lethal with that. Plus, also, one thing to keep in mind, these tokens have lifelink. So these have a lot more versatility than just being chump blockers or just being like a end of the turn, oh, I'm going to create a big army and then swing in for lethal. You could also just use this as a decent combat trick to, say, remove a creature, and then, oh, hey, all those tokens die, which maybe you have a die-centric synergy in your deck, or, oh, hey, the life gain can actually help you gain life, which helps you keep you ahead, and maybe you have life gain synergies in your deck and such. I mean, I don't know how much I could go on. This card is absurd. It is. There's a reason why this is a mythic. Don't underestimate this card, especially with Convoke. The fact that you can use creatures to cast a spell. That's the cherry on top. That's the freaking cherry on freaking top. And if you cast multiple instances of this, even with tokens from Marshal of the Multitudes, it's just... wow, I could go on and on. I'll just say it like this. This is going to be a fun card to talk about in the set review, but overall, unless they ridiculously don't encourage token-like synergies in the Selesnya, which I would be surprised, this card is really, 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 really good. But overall, that's all the cards they've been revealed so far, at least of this recording. I'll try to go on the next day to talk about my opinion on the next set of cards they reveal. Overall, though, I hope you all have a lovely day. This is Jordan. Whoops. Seen some behind the scenes there. This is Jordan Leroy Hansen, also known as LevDev, signing out.